Chapter 6. Be My Dog. Eric and Roy walked home. They crossed Ralph Street at the school crossing. Roy said about this code, "I've been thinking, why not nod your head for yes and shake it for no?" "I prefer to bark," said Eric. "Or sometimes you could write?" "I'll bark," Eric said. In Seymour Road, the two boys bought a licorice wheel and a licorice pipe from Russell's sweet shop. "Another thing," said Roy, "if you change again, I want you to come round." "What if it's late? You'll be in bed." "I want you to come," said Roy. "You could howl out the window." Eric and Roy balanced along the wall in front of the old people's home. They watched fire engines going up Joynings Bank. "Dogs chase fire engines, you know," said Roy. And he said, "If you do change, you might not change back." "Think of that." "I already did," said Eric. "Well, the thing is," Roy threw his jockey cap in the air and caught it. "What I was thinking was, you could be my dog." "Thanks," said Eric. "Yes, I'd get my Uncle Colin to make you a kennel." "I'd rather live in a house," said Eric. They passed a postbox. Roy pushed his arms inside as far as it would go. "I always wanted a dog," he said. On most evenings after school, Roy and Eric would have their tea and go to the park. But Thursday was Roy's staying in night. He had piano lesson at 4:30 and had to practice afterwards. Roy and Eric separated at the junction of Clay Street and Taylor's Road. Roy was hopping with frustration. He couldn't bear to let Eric out of his sight. If he was going to turn into a dog again, Roy wanted to be there. All the same, what could he do? If he missed his lessons, his mum would keep him in for a week. Well, a few days anyway. She'd done it before. Roy walked backwards up Taylor's Road. He cupped his hands in his mouth. "Don't forget, come round." "Right," said Eric. "Come round." "I heard you." Roy kept his gaze on Eric until there was nothing to see. He pushed both hands in his pocket and continued up the road. When Eric entered the kitchen, his dad was there. He was drinking a mug of tea and reading the Radio Times. His hair was tousled and he had a sleepy look on his face. Eric's dad usually took a nap in the afternoon. This was because he started work at 4 o'clock in the morning. "Your mouth is all black," he said. "I've been eating licorice wheels," said Eric. He looked out the window. His mum was unpegging washing from the line. Emily was playing with her play pool. She had her swimming costume on, fetching things from all over the garden and putting them in water. Mrs. Banks came in with a basket of washing. "Your mouth's black," she said. "I've been eating licorice," said Eric. He went into the garden and looked at Emily's pool. It was full of leaves and flower heads. 2 of her little plastic dolls were in there, and a dinosaur, and a driver from one of his cars. "Mouth's black," said Emily. "Licorice," said Eric. He gave Emily the bit he had saved for her. When she wasn't looking, he rescued his diver from the pool. Eric returned to the house and went up to his room. He came down and went into the garden again. He was restless. His head was full of uncomfortable thoughts. Without Roy to talk to, he had trouble sorting them out. Also, everything was, funnier when Roy was around. "What if I change now?" he thought. "At tea time? What if I only half change? Or they put me out and the mastiff gets me?" Eric had another problem too. His mum was watching him again. The longer he didn't tell her anything, the more of a secret it became, and the more he felt suspected. When they were having tea, Mr. Banks said, "Did you tell Eric about that dog?" "Yes, he heard it. Didn't you, Eric?" "Yes," said Eric. "Strange," said Mr. Banks. "I thought I knew all the dogs around here." Sometime later, Mrs. Banks leant over the table and placed her hand on Eric's forehead. "Does he look all right to you, Charles?" "He looks all right," said Mr. Banks. "A bit ugly, maybe." "Charles!" Mrs. Banks laughed. Eric laughed too. So did Emily. Emily hadn't got the joke. She was laughing because everyone else was. Then the others laughed because she was laughing. Emily laughed more. A piece of tomato shot out of her mouth and fell into the butter. After tea, Eric watched television for a while. His dad had gone to the sorting office to do some overtime. His mum bathed Emily. Eric switched from one channel to the next. Finally, he switched off altogether and tried to read a book. But it was no use. He couldn't concentrate. He put the book down and stared at himself in the sideboard mirror. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he caught a slight movement, which made him jump. He turned in time to see a face at the window with hands chucked around it, peering in. "It's Roy!" Eric opened the window. "Can't stop," said Roy. "Just sneaking out." He glanced into the room, where it was everybody. Eric told him. Roy said, "I've been thinking. What if you only half change?" "I thought of that," said Eric. "The thing is, what would you rather be? A boy with a dog's head or a dog with a boy's head?" While Eric was considering this, his mum came into the room. "Hello, Roy." "Hello, Mrs. Banks," said Roy. Eric, with his back to his mum, gave Roy a look. The look said, "Be careful what you say." Roy cleared his throat. He took his jockey cap off and twirled it on his finger. "Isn't Roy coming in?" said Mrs. Banks. "Aren't you coming in?" said Eric. "No," said Roy. "I've got to go. Just sneaked, come out, you know." He gave Eric a look. The look said, "Don't forget, come around." And then he left. Mrs. Banks put the television on. She sat down on the sofa with a bag of wool. "Is Roy all right?" she said.